Whoever made this list is interesting. I'd like to talk to that person. In this video, we're going to go over the top personal development books that I think are great for personal development and business growth. All right, let's get into it. First one is my old mate Jordan. What a legend. It's pretty good. Okay, so Peterson, in my opinion, he's really cool. Obviously, he's got a great outlook on life. He's very optimistic. He's super inspirational. However, there is a underlying religious ideology tempered through this book. And so if you don't relate to the religious practices, or what he calls the biblical corpus, if you don't resonate with that, or perhaps you're just atheistic, then it's just difficult to relate it to you totally. Like, the rules are great and they're obviously and ironically universal, but I don't think that they need a religious connotation in order for you to understand the story behind them. So for me, that's where I kind of lost out on that for me. But I like the rest of it. The rest of it's pretty good. Power. All right, so Power. Again, it's a pretty good book. I think it's in the same ones as Mastery. In fact, I should probably put that with it, actually, too. Really heavy going books, deep content, and there's a lot of things to learn in them. Probably too much for a simple read, and a lot of the content is, to me, feels outdated now because of the way in which society has changed so much. And people say that, like, psychology doesn't change that much. People are still people, and what influenced people back then influences people now. But that is true to the most part, but I still think there are a lot more wisdom, and people understand cheap manipulation, and especially if they're kind of more spiritually evolved as a human, they get these tactics and things that are going on, and so therefore they're not really that useful in terms of the Power one. And then Mastery is really good because it teaches you the concept of, in order to master something, you have to have 10,000 hours at something, and to be a master at one thing is better than being a generalist. Specialist is better than being a generalist. It's the analogy of, in order to chop down a tree, 80% of your time should be spent sharpening the saw, and then 20% is actually on the chopping of the tree. And the point is that you should do the simple foundational things over and over and over until you get really good at that one thing, and then grow from there. Most people who are successful do one thing really, really, really well. Like, that's all they do. They're just really good at that one thing, and they just get a master at that. And as an entrepreneur, it's tempting to be like, yeah, I'm going to do marketing and sales, and I'm going to be great at HR, and I'm going to do the accounting and understand my numbers. And it's tempting to try and do everything. And I'm going to build the website, and I'm going to do the branding and build the logo. But really, you should just be the master at the one thing and then outsource the rest of it to everybody else. 4-hour work week. For me, completely life-changing. Tim Ferriss, 4-hour work week. Pretty dated now, but the principles can still apply. So in it, he talks about outsourcing as one of the huge topics of that book. And actually, using that book, I managed to find my first virtual assistant, who has been my virtual assistant for the past 15, 16 years now. Shout out to Jing. Yeah, she's been able to help me grow my businesses over the years, and she's just been so useful. Like, anything that I needed in terms of personal record keeping or calendar appointments, accounting stuff. She's even helped with some design elements. She's been really useful to be able to, like, help me scale where I've needed to find solutions to problems that she's been able to go away and research, find the solution, bring them back to me, and then it helps me, like, speed up that process of problem solving. So yeah, completely life-changing for me. It was the first way in which I could start to outsource and offload my time, which allowed me to scale. And then obviously there's still loads of other good things in that book too, but it's kind of in the same philosophy as Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yes, the principles are great. The tactics may be out of date now and are slightly changed, but the principles are really good. The Way of the Superior Man. I want to talk about this one first because this one was pretty amazing to me in, I think, personal development and especially in maturation. So going through late teens to early adulthood, young man, I read this book probably when I was about 22, 23. And the chapter that stuck with me, I know what you're thinking, no, it's not ejaculating up the spine. The chapter that stuck with me was about act as if your father's dead. So I was definitely seeking approval from my friends and family in the success that I was having. So I was doing everything for that approval. The decisions that I made weren't necessarily decisions that were good for my business. They were ones that would make me look good. So yeah, definitely that changed the way I looked at success and the way I was operating in life. And it made me focus on, okay, part of my maturation is to be doing it for my best benefit and my family's best benefit and whatever my journey is. That was definitely the way I changed my outlook on life. Really good book for perspective. And there are also loads of other good chapters in there as well. So definitely give that a read. Highly Effective People. It's pretty average. I mean, I don't want to shit on classic books because they're classic and they're really useful. But yeah, I mean, just not that influenceable to me. I read that around the same time as I was reading Tony Robbins stuff. And to me, the inspiration and motivation that came from reading other books was more effective than strategies and tactics on how to be more effective. Influenced by Robert Cialdini. Top up there. Bang, 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 life-changing. Simply because the skill of copywriting is basically salesmanship on paper. And the better you get at copywriting, the more money you make. Influence was a really clever book because it taught you the ability to influence with psychological habits like your foot in the door and the law of reciprocation and all these kind of concepts that are now applied to copywriting today. So influence, and then his follow-up book, Pre-suasion. That was also a really good book as well, and that deserves to be up there in the life-changing section too, or maybe an amazing, because it's just not as classic as influence, but really, really good book, worth a read, especially if you want to get into copywriting or influencing people. And in fact, a really important point I should have made is influence you use in everything. You are selling people all the time on everything that you do. Every decision you make with your partner, every decision you make with your friends, every decision you make with your colleagues, with your boss, with whoever, you are trying to influence the other person to get the outcome that you think is best for either you, them, or for the both of you. So learning the skill of influence is super important. And so yeah, that's why I'd recommend that book. It's great. Psycho-cybernetics. It's a pretty good book. Again, it was recommended by, I think, if anybody knows Dan Kennedy, he's a copywriting expert and genius. He often talks about psycho-cybernetics, so that's where I kind of got into it. For me, pretty average book. I don't think it's worth a read in terms of the content. It's just not great, in my opinion. Dotcom secrets. Let's move on to this one. This is... Ooh, I'm going to be controversial here. Okay, I think it's harmful and bad. Okay, here's the reason why. I think the concepts are really good. Don't get me wrong. It introduces you to marketing funnels and how to basically build one of the most important elements of marketing, if you can master it, is building a customer base that you don't pay for, right? And the idea is that you set up a funnel whereby you spend advertising dollars and you generate profit in return. And so you build a customer base for at least break even, but hopefully better. And that way you can attract customers to you who can then build trust, who are most likely to work with you again, and have a system that pays effectively for you to get customers. It pays you to get customers. Great concept, great theory, very hard to apply. Needs a lot of skills to learn. And the reason why I think it's harmful about it is because it's not really a startup strategy. It's taught us the whole ClickFunnels. So the guy Russell Brunson is the guy who owns Dotcom, who runs ClickFunnels, and he wrote Dotcom Secrets, and it's advertised as a startup tool. And I think that ClickFunnels is more a marketing tool for when you have an established business. They have a challenge called the One Funnel Away Challenge, which is like you build out your funnel and you sell an e-commerce product or a digital product, and then there you go, you have everything you ever need. It's really useful for companies that are more established and that have a path to fulfillment, the infrastructure to support everything. They have all their sales force in place, they have the customer support side, it's all down, and it's a way to scale the marketing side of things, and adding a funnel is a great way to do that. And ClickFunnels is a great WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get, in order to build out pages that do that. So yeah, I think it's harmful and bad for that reason, because it's taught as a startup tool and it's the right thing at the wrong time. It's definitely a marketing tool. Don't get caught into it, and don't think it's just like, oh, I could just make a quick funnel and make millions. And that's not usually the case. Power versus Force, life-changing. If I could put this book above all the others, I would. I'm going to put it here because it's first. Funny that it's been included in these kind of books of personal development and business. Whoever made this list is interesting. I'd like to talk to that person. But Power versus Force, incredible and life-changing. I'm not going to give you any spoilers. Go and read this book. And I'm going to give you a little disclaimer. If you aren't into the physiological side of the stuff, which I totally understand, in terms of the kinesiology, and I get it. I didn't relate to that too, so kind of skip past that. And if you can get past that bit, the rest of the content on the psychology and emotions and understanding all the human emotions is amazing. And transcending the levels of consciousness, the kind of graph, the logarithmic process of transcending levels of consciousness and applying that to like emotional states of being in the moment, doesn't get better than that. That is literally the essence of what it means to be human. It's really, 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 really good. Go read it. Rich Dad, Poor Dad Boom, life-changing. I'll tell you why this is life-changing for me. The book itself is pretty poor. Like, I've listened to it maybe 4 times because every time I talk to people, young people particularly, I always say, oh, go read Rich Dad Poor Dad. So for me, it's a really good book because it teaches and introduces the concept of working for yourself. I read this book just at a really critical point in my career. So I was in 6th form, which is like the step before university in the UK. Everybody was going to college and everyone was also at university. They were talking about what they're going to do. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was running a computer support and a social media business on the side, as well as a hosting business, but whatever. And I read it, and I read the concept of return of investment, and it blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, I'm going down this path and I'm going to go in IT, and I'm going to go, I think I was looking at a marketing role or something. I can't even remember now back then. But I did the math in terms of how much the university was going to cost, the degree was going to cost me, and how much a salary would be after I got that degree, how much I could apply to it. And the ROI was terrible. And I was like, what am I doing? This is stupid. And so, yeah, I was the only one of my friends who didn't go to university. And instead, I went down the business path, which I'm so glad I did, and I'm self-employed, and I went down the entrepreneurial journey. And it's a great book for opening people's minds to entrepreneurship and understanding the most important concept, which I'm going to pull into this one, which is cash flow quadrant, which is there are 4 quadrants to his concept, and that is the employed, the self-employed or the specialist, then the business owner, and the investor. And the idea is to move from the left side of the quadrant to the right. So most people, they are employed, and they have the downside of it is that they pay taxes, and when they get paid, they have no leverage. The idea is to move from being trapped by the employed rat race to actually owning a business and being an investor of businesses so that you can own assets that pay you rather than you having to work for a job. And it's a great concept, and even just that concept itself blew my mind because I didn't even think it was I didn't even know that was a thing that I could do. It was like, this is possible, by the way. And then I was like, okay, great, I'm going to do that. And it also teaches you the great concepts of how they could leverage real estate. You don't have to have the whole money for the property. You only have to have the down payment. And then if you can take a mortgage and make sure that the interest rate, after all the calculations, and the interest rate and what you're paying on the mortgage is less than the cash flow you'd get from a rental opportunity, then between those 2 margins, you make a profit. And so you could make money on real estate. Great concept, great book. I know it's responsible for a lot of people who have got into real estate. Fantastic. Think and Grow Rich. Classic book. Pretty amazing. I wouldn't say it's life-changing because the concepts you learn in it aren't necessarily like, whoa. They're just great stories about how people have turned adversity into success. And it's a good business book because it makes you start to think about problems as opportunities, and changing that mindset and starting to understand that is a really good thing. The only reason I don't think it's life-changing is because unfortunately Napoleon Hill died broke. He spent all this time interviewing all these rich people and he never made anything of himself. It was only years later after he was gone that this book did well and made a whole bunch of money, but it was unfortunately after he's dead and gone. So a really interesting book, great concepts, great stories. Give it a listen. 10x Rule, Grant Cardone. He's a really good sales guy. He's a sales guy who teaches marketing. He always is like I remember he did a great interview with Jordan Belford, also known as the Wolf of Wall Street, who's probably one of the best sales guys in the world if you park the illegal stuff to one side and just say, looking at his sales skills, how good are they? He was in an interview with Grant Cardone and he was asking him about like sales technique. What kind of closes are really good? Or like, how do you open? Or like, what kind of process do you do to move people towards a sale? Like, how do you build trust and things like that? Grant was just talking all about, you got to have leads. You got to have leads. He just kept mentioning the marketing side of things. It's all volume, man. It's all volume. Just gotta have leads. So for me, he's pretty good. He's a really good marketer, advertised as a salesman. So that's a really interesting one for you to look at. And he did, if you ever get a chance to look at Grant Cardone, he's a love him or hate him kind of guy, I think. He's very brass and very blunt, and he intimidates a lot of people, but I think he's a really clever marketer, personally. All right, last one. Awaken the Giant Within. Okay, so I would put this in life-changing, but I think I'm going to put it in amazing. Only in that, if this is the audiobook version, I'll put it in life-changing. If it's the book, it's in amazing. Because, unfortunately, with the book, you don't get the same level of inspiration and excitement you do with listening to Tony Robbins. So I've done a whole bunch of Tony Robbins programs, Personal Power, Ultimate Success Mastery, things that he's put out over the years. They're really, really good. And I'd really recommend, if you're getting started in personal development, he's a great person to start with. Especially go listen to Personal Power 2, the audiobook. If you can get hold of that program, that's so useful and so valuable. It builds you not only from an inspirational point of view, but it builds great mindset over like 14 days or something. And I think there's a longer one that they do for 30 days that you can keep listening to him for 30 days if you can manage 30 days of Tony Robbins back to back. But really, really cool. Good, worth a listen, and will help you build habits, not just give you short-term inspirational bursts, but will actually help you build habits towards the things that you're trying to achieve.